Yo, how's it going everybody? It's Sketch and welcome back to the channel. And on today's show we're going to be looking at the first-person shooter Black, developed by Criterion Games and published by EA in February of 2006 for the PlayStation 2, original Xbox, and PC. I remember back when this game was announced and its advertisements began to air just how insane it looked, especially at the time. The ad prominently features a room being torn to ribbons by gunfire and explosions while all the furniture went to pieces. Then the snippet of gameplay shown in the ad also looked pretty sick, piquing the curiosity of FPS fans in the mid-2000s. Back in the day, and I was floored by how much this changed the game with the cinematic FPS genre and how it technically managed to pull off some impressive visual feats and solid gunplay. Throughout the game's 8 stages, you'll play through the events as told by Jack Keller as you pursue and storm the stronghold of the 7th Wave. The journey will take you to several locales in order to track down and immobilize former operative Linux while leaving miles of rubble in your wake. Each mission is broken down, retelling your accounts of what took place as the interrogators interview you and reveal more of the intel as the story progresses. Gameplay-wise, Black is a game with action movie set pieces in mind, and nearly everything in the game environment is destructible. This is one of the first FPS games I remember that really leaned into intense visuals and surprisingly good gunplay for a console shooter. You're able to hold 2 weapons at a time, ranging from all the staples in rifles, shotguns, and launchers, which all feel good to use. Gun feel here is one of the game's main talking points during its development, and some fairly interesting physics were used as a basis for in-game gun performance. Across the board, all weapons had a unique feel and held their own during encounters, while not feeling too over or underpowered. You'll be tasked with several objectives to complete for each stage, and anything additional will add up as a bonus and move you closer to unlocking the game's coveted silver and gold-plated armor sets. The stages ramp up gradually, but as mentioned earlier, there are often waves of enemies that aren't pushovers often, and once the heavier enemies start coming out, the fireworks are really about to begin. Enemy AI is also pretty decent, resulting in squads not only swarming you at times, but will also flank your position and drive you out of cover. Snipers and enemies with RPGs will also smoke you out of locations, so keep your head on the swivel. Gunplay and destruction are essentially the 2 main focused here, and both are definitely achieved a few times over. The guns all feel pretty powerful here, and most have alternate fire modes to cut through the opposition. Soldiers across the board are pretty spongy, but precision shots to the head and environmental hazards can save yourself some ammunition. The heavier enemies like the shotgunner and the riot shield holders will also require either damage from an explosive or several shots to the head to put them down. True to the adverts, majority of the environments are destructible, and it opens up unique ways to take down your enemies. A well-placed rocket can not only wipe a squad, but also chain react to a fuel tank next to a box of landmines and a matchbook, in turn knocking down an entire section of a building or object. The action pretty much stays fast-paced, and a lot of things go boom in the interim. The variety of ways you can approach encounters is one of the cool things about this game. The level of details with the environments is also pretty sick considering how much stuff can be destroyed on each stage. Granted, the Xbox and PC versions have a little bit more graphical oomph and better draw distance, Black does look and feel solid across all platforms. Graphics wise, Black is running on the Renderware engine, and this engine was seen quite a bit around this time in various titles. The focus from the development team was to do for the FPS genre what the Burnout series did for racing games and just get as wild as possible with the action and destruction. The Renderware engine truly does some interesting things in game, like the blur effects upon reloading, the depth of field, and in-game perspective also have a pretty solid range, even though the PS2 version isn't quite as sharp as the Xbox or PC version, but all of them straight up cook visually. Gun effects and level effects were also a big emphasis with the weapon behaviors and the impact on environments. The level of detail here with the bullet impact on sprites and levels actually stands up pretty well even by today's standards. Bullets leave impact marks on objects and leave visible damage also. It's interesting they didn't quite go the same route with enemy damage graphics as the Soldier of Fortune games did, which did predate Black, whereas with those games that had graphically violent kill animations, Black put that same energy more so into destroying the environment. There's some pretty good lighting and particle effects seen here too. Going through each stage has some surprisingly good lighting effects tricks, with sun rays shining through boarded windows to clouds of dust and debris flying everywhere, and even for its time, still looks pretty solid. Enemy and weapon animations are also pretty good here, with some fun ragdoll physics and dynamics. When the enemies try to clinch to the railing and rooftops before falling, with some nice attention to detail. The weapon animations also look awesome too, and is definitely the forefront of the experience. Flurries of muzzle flash and seas of bullet casings are seen throughout each gunfight, and those have some constant cinematic moments. Stages are fairly varied and open up all with live action cutscenes of the interrogation that preface more of the narrative as the game unfolds. As the story unravels, the action intensifies. It's interesting to note that at first the story wasn't going to be included initially, but even with it being shoehorned in, it works out well enough, setting the stage for each level while telling a fairly interesting tale. This was also a product of the times, with games that didn't have auto-regenerating health, and instead players need to find med packs scattered around the board. When your health drops below half, the screen will go saturated red until you find health, or use a medkit which you can hold 1 to 3 of depending on the difficulty. This also brings in the sounds of your pulse as an audio cue that you've taken significant damage. Sound-wise, this is beyond solid from its effects work to its soundtrack, which would actually net the game a few award nominations and wins back in 2006. The game's soundtrack, composed by Chris Tilton and Michael Giacchino, has some very intense scores in here, which actually makes you feel like you've been tossed into a war epic with what seems like an orchestra narrating your mission, accompanied by the sound effects of the guns with the blend of cinematic and realistic audio profiling. Turns into a solid mixture of ambience and complete chaos. The explosions in this game, especially the larger ones toward the end, still sound awesome. The Foley art on the booms in this game are definitely top tier. Overall, Black is a really fun and eye-catching first-person shooter, which still holds up even nearly a couple decades after it released. While not a perfect shooter, it's got more action and explosions than you can shake a Molotov at. The only real downside with the game, besides its checkpoint system at times, is just a very short game, clocking in around 4 hours if you just fly through it without doing many of the side objectives. Add those on, you get maybe another 2 or 3 hours out of it. While short in length, it's stacked on action and is a good one to play through at least a couple times. Black gets an 8 out of 10 and comes recommended to FPS and action game fans since it's a roller coaster of a shooter, and the sound and action work in tandem to craft quite the experience. The PS2 and Xbox versions are typically cheap to pick up, so for the price, it's totally worth it. If you're comfortable with FPS games in general, you'll probably fly through this one, but have a blast doing so. And I thank you again for checking out this video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future, but until then, take it easy, stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.